The comic strip Gasoline Alley has been running under various authors and illustrators for well over 100 years. Of course, its original creator, Frank King, retired long, long ago in the 1950s, I believe, and he went to his reward over 50 years ago. But somehow the strip in other hands has kept going. It's barely a shadow of itself now. And I say that without meaning any offense to its current creator, but I just checked in on the current run, and it's eating its own tail in that one of the strip's protagonists, Wallet, who was one of its original protagonists back when the strip began in 1918, is acknowledged in the strip to be well over 100 years old now. And he's interacting with discontinued comic strip characters like Mutt and Jeff and Snuffy Smith, and I think the guy who drove the Tunerville trolley. One of the great aspects of Gasoline Alley, as originated by Frank King, is that it transformed from a gag-a-day strip during the First World War about America's faddish obsession with cars, which turned out not to be a fad at all, of course, into a soap opera with a whole lot of continuity to it. Now decades and decades of continuity. And King allowed his characters to age. The problem is that if you're going to do that, you have to be willing to let your characters die off. And I understand that some characters have been killed off in the course of the run. But once you get to the point that Walt Wallet, who was introduced as an adult in 1918, is still kicking around in 2025, you have entered the realm of fantasy, and apparently you become so self-referential that you disappear into this weird, I'm not sure how to describe the dimensional space of Tesseract, in which both Walt is inside his own story and metafictionally commenting on it at the same time, commenting on the unreality of it, through these interactions with characters who are described as being from the old comic strip retirement home. Under King, it was still funny, but it took itself a little bit more seriously, and it evolved from being purely about working on cars as a hobby to the story of a family developing and what it was like to grow up in America in the 30s and 40s and so on, to the point that when Walt's adopted son, Skeezix, joined the army in 1942 to participate in the effort against fascism, it was kind of a big deal in the culture. So it tried to reflect the real world around it, as opposed to, again, just becoming so self-referential that it ceased to comment on anything at all except its own improbable continued existence. My point about this, my point in raising this, was not to critique this syndicate-driven perpetuation of a piece of art that has probably outlived its utility, just as it has outlived its creator and his sensibility, but to talk about one of the times that it did reflect its world quite accurately and in a way that would be opaque to us if we didn't know what it was trying to get at. In one of those reprint volumes, which I happen to possess, Walt takes an automobile trip, which was more fraught than today because the cars weren't at all reliable, and there really was a practical aspect to knowing not just how to change a tire, but how to fix all of it, because it was likely to quit on you. He takes an automobile trip from the presumed Chicago-ish home of the strip to Florida. This is nearly 50 years before Disney World and SeaWorld and Universal and all those theme parks. The state just hadn't been built out at all. Not even Mar-a-Lago existed yet. And then there was, in the early 1920s, a Florida land bubble. Everybody wanted to own a piece of Florida, and so they started making more Florida. So there are a couple of scenes during Walt's trip, which must have taken forever because cars topped out at about 45 miles an hour back then, that he's depicted standing on a beach, and there is a pipe next to him or in the background, which is just coughing more sand out onto that beach. He is watching landfill in action. Now, what most people probably didn't realize at the time, though some surely knew, is that landfill is not the most stable surface on which to build. In fact, it's very temporary. When the hurricane sweeps in, it takes that land back with it, such that, for example, with Hurricane Katrina, there was significantly less Louisiana coast after than there was before it. You know who should have known that? John J. McGraw, manager, vice president of the New York Giants for over 30 years. His home park, the Polo Grounds, was built on a mudflat of the Harlem River. There wasn't really anything of solid substance under it, just sand and water. And each season, the longtime groundskeeper, a former player named Henry Fabian, had to rebuild the field because during the off-season, it subsided, which is to say that it sank. Maybe John McGraw applied his Polo Grounds experience to the Florida real estate boom and then disregarded it. Maybe he never made the connection at all. On December 3rd, 1925, happens to be my birthday, although fortunately not that year. I am not Walt Wallet. I have not been running since 1918. The Tampa Tribune contained this full-page ad. You know John J. McGraw. The whole country knows him. Florida knows him as the man who has been preaching Florida in a series of annual sermons every year since he has been bringing the Giants to Florida to train. John McGraw knew every spot on this continent where a baseball team could be conditioned. He selected Sarasota because he had known Sarasota for 30 years. He knew its incomparable climate. He knew that here there is sunshine without humidity, warmth without weakening languor, and that in the pulse-stirring, blood-cleansing breezes that sweep across the coast of western Florida from the Gulf, there is life and vigor and that old pep-bringing quality that is necessary when a crew of winter-softened athletes must be seasoned like Toledo blades within a few weeks. And now, John J. McGraw has realized the ambition of his life and has started the building of a great park to be filled with the homes of those from the north who realize that the spot the master sportsman of the country has selected in which to conserve and develop the vitality of his victory-snatching athletes must be for them also, a place in which to build up and hold the vitality and health that is drained off like liquor from the barrel by the chilling humidity and body-shattering vagaries of temperature in the north. He is now master and overlord of that stretch of waterfront land lying to the west of the Tamiami Trail, the main artery of coastal western Florida, and a short distance north of Sarasota, and this he has named Pennant Park. Pennant Park. Yes, Pennant Park. Lying on Sarasota Bay, the most wonderful stretch of waterfront in all Florida, within a few minutes now of what is the swiftest growing city in Florida, and a community which has acquired the trick of multiplying its population by 10 within the 12-month, Pennant Park, within a few weeks, will become known as the most widely advertised and most popular subdivision in all western Florida. Each of the 8 towns into which the John J. McGraw team of Giants marches triumphantly many times during the baseball year, and Baltimore, home of the old Orioles, Louisville, and Memphis, will be told of the beauties of Pennant Park and the advantages of investment in this near suburb of Sarasota through full-page advertising that will carry its message to every one of the millions of admirers of John J. McGraw. Those who know what advertising means to Florida in these days will realize what the effect of this will be. There will be a migration of John J. McGraw's friends to Pennant Park, and within a short time, the 5,000 lots soon to go on sale will be milled over and sifted out. You know John J. McGraw. You know his loyalty to his friends. You know the loyalty of his friends to him. You know there isn't a man who has ever been admitted to John J. McGraw's I'm sorry, I have to break character here. John J. McGraw was thrown out of the Lambs Club for inflicting a skull fracture on one of its members, and I believe a broken ankle on another one. And of course, he was famous for trading off players when they had outlived their usefulness, as every good general manager or manager must, and he was a bit of both. But whether he was inclined to be loyal or not, and he was very loyal to some people, and it spoke well of him that he found jobs around the Polo Grounds for down-on-their-luck players like Dan Bruthers, Bad Bill Dallin, Amos Russi, and Jesse Burkett. Simultaneously, Casey Stengel spent the rest of his life talking about how he had the Giants' only 2 game-winning hits in the 1923 World Series, and he woke up the next season playing for the Boston Braves, and he said, among many other cracks on the subject, "Good thing I didn't win any more ball games for him. If I had, he'd probably have had me sent to jail." For a manager, loyalty is a double-edged sword, or shall we say, Toledo blade. If you stick with a player and he rewards you with good performance, then you're praised for your loyalty. Conversely, if the player plays badly, we call this the Bernie Williams story, then you are chastised for your valuing sentimentality over the good of the team. McGraw understood this very well, and later so did Stengel. Where were we? Oh, yes. You know his loyalty to his friends. You know the loyalty of his friends to him. And let me just add in this bit, that when journeyman pitcher Carmen Hill joined the Giants at the tail end of the 1922 season, he sat down with catcher Earl Smith, also called Oil Smith, for the way that Dodgers fans supposedly pronounced his name. The nickname was coined by baseball columnist and future anti-Semite and White Ring. White Ring is actually more appropriate. Right-wing nut job Westbrook Pegler, who I've mentioned many times on the program. It was understood by all ball players that McGraw liked to call the game from the bench, and he had a number of rules about what a pitcher could throw when. You get the sense that in his old age, and he got there early, that he was just telling his pitcher, curve, curve, curve. He never wanted to challenge a hitter. Well, Smith turned to Carmen Hill and he said, "If I call for something that you don't want, you shake me off. Don't hesitate. Pitch your own game. As for that little pot-bellied son of a bitch on the bench, don't look at him, and neither will I." In telling the story, Hill concluded, "Oh, did they hate each other." So, to recap, my future Pennant Park investors, you know his loyalty, you know the loyalty of his friends, and you know how much some of his players bloody despised him. And in that way do we, hand in hand, you, I, Oil Smith, and John J. McGraw, go skipping jiggity-jig into the infinite inning. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show. Infinite inning number 326, I believe. Collect them, trade them, but don't smoke them. There are a lot of additives in here that might just be damaging to your lungs. Good for the brain, bad for the lungs. This is one of the problems of human biology. I'll give you an example. I'm supposed to drink a lot of water every day, and in this way, I will not get kidney stones. I won't give you the gross details of this, but I struggle to do that. And then I hit upon adding just a little bit of sugary syrup to things. One of my closest friends gifted me with a bottle of syrup for no particular reason. It's not like I've never had them before. It's not like I wasn't aware of them, the kind of thing that you might put in your coffee. Well, I found that if I just added this to a little bit of sparkling water, that I would drink water all day long. So the trick is add just enough that it doesn't taste like plain water, and not so much that I'm drinking the equivalent of a Coke 3 times a day. And so far, so good. Small sample caveats do apply, but so far, no kidney stones. My sugar statistics are fine. No one's saying I'm making myself diabetic doing this, and I've not gained any weight. I am not necessarily suggesting this as a solution for everyone because, well, adding refined sugar to your diet is generally considered a horrible thing to do, but this is my point. I'm trying to balance all these different imperatives. How are you? Are you trying to balance imperatives? Survival in a difficult time? That pretty much describes my overall state of being just now. And who am I? I am Stephen Goldman, your convivial host for this excursion towards understanding the present by means of a trip to the past. I also must confess I am not a human being. I am a talking basset hound, the rare talking basset hound who also knows a great deal about old-time baseball. But damn this hip dysplasia. Well, okay, it's not true, but wouldn't it be cool if it were? Then you could tell your friends about this and say, look, I know you don't like baseball, Frank. I know you don't know your Tinker from your Evers from your Chance, but it's the only podcast hosted by a dog, a talking dog. I add that qualifier because there are so many podcasts that there surely is one hosted by a dog, or probably someone else pretending to be a dog. So I must confess this is going to be sort of an unstructured episode, and I am not done riffing on Pennant Park.
Pennant Park.
Yes, Pennant Park.
I just called a break where I did because it felt like time. To borrow from the somewhat dishonest backside of the album sleeve for the Beatles' Let It Be, this is a bit of a new phase Infinite Inning episode. A lot of them have been lately. And whereas on that album sleeve, the lie was that there were any phases to come, the new phase was one and done and had actually taken place chronologically prior to the release of the Beatles' actual final album. This band is not breaking up. We go on here at the Infinite Inning. It's simply that I am torn in a lot of different directions right now. Some of it is on the field, some of it is off the field, some of it is, as I referred to a moment ago, with my add sugar dieting advice, that I've been perhaps too concerned with health maintenance, although there's really no reason to be, not any more reason than anyone else has, I suppose. And I've been torn by an ongoing project that I've been referring to going back to October. It's taking a while because I'm being an insane perfectionist. You'd never know it from this program, but yes, that is what I am being as I tell the story of all creation going back to before the Big Bang. I enjoy the work, although, as is my wont, many days I wake up and I ask myself, will this turn out to have been worth it? And of course, as with so many things, it's not the end result, it's the stories that you told along the way. Another thing that's been distracting me, and I wrote about this at Baseball Prospectus this week, is, well, the state of everything. And I've been thinking a lot about the kind of social media posts that I see where someone says they like something. It could be old movies, that's an example that I used. It could be nothing deeper than cheddar cheese. How deep is your cheese, as the Bee Gees sang? Well, not very deep at all, but it's okay if you like it and you want to share that with folks. But there is this clapback that comes and it says, how can you be talking about cheese at a time like this? And I am torn by that because I am someone who has had a long career writing about a kid's game, writing about grown men running around in pajamas and hitting a ball with a stick. And yes, at times like these, it does seem a little bit useless, self-indulgent even. When the ship is going down, shouldn't everyone be over there bailing? You can't really opt out and say like, no, my words are too necessary, so you guys bail. I'll just be over here with my pen and pad making notes on Ted Williams, all right? Simultaneously, not all of us can dwell on misery all the time, can strategize and fight all the time. Sometimes you might just need a break watching or talking about guys running around in pajamas hitting a ball with a stick. And yet on a third hand, and I can do a million hands with this, all hands on deck right now. And I tried to wrestle this into submission for my own benefit. The story is on the front page at BP right now. You have to scroll down slightly to get to it. It's called How Can We Baseball? It is under my name. And if you like old peanut strips, it makes reference to a couple, among other things. And I do hope, as always, that you will read it. And if you have comments, you'll leave them or let me know by any of the means that you have of reaching me. Now, we are due for a break, and I have to talk about breaks for a second. Going back to the beginning of this program, I have used a lot of different music sources to comment on the stories, and a lot of people have told me it's one of their favorite aspects of the show. You might have noticed I didn't do it last time when I was about as harried as I am this week to get the thing out on schedule, because I've noticed when I miss schedules, this is a parenthetical, I've noticed when I miss a delivery that some of you go away and never come back, and so I don't have anybody to spare, so I am keeping this on schedule even if a badger has torn off my arm. And the truth is, I always feel like a badger has torn off my arm or is about to, but it's my pleasure to be here. And so we are sticking as religiously as we can to the schedule. But I did omit some of the music cues, all of the music cues last week, because of late, one of the major podcasting platforms has been getting on me about my usage of some of those cues. Now, I am not ignorant of copyright law. I am a holder of several copyrights myself, depending on how you count it, dozens of copyrights. And I don't want anyone to use my work without compensation either. That said, you will have noted that throughout the run of the show, except for a couple of times when I've gotten lazy, I've made it a point to say, hey, this is the song you just heard. This is who it was by. This is who wrote it. This is what it was saying at the time. And I felt like that was enough of a commentary on it to constitute fair usage. Now, here's the thing. I am not an attorney, and I am not going to try if a podcasting service says, no, that's not the case. I'm not going to try to argue that with them. So for now, we stick with the old original infinite inning ad bumpers, and if we get a chance to make some new ones, maybe vary things up, then you will get to hear that in those spaces in the future. But I hope you understand, because the choice really comes down to sticking with it or losing some outlets for this show, and I think in that case, the choice is clear. I am telling you this now, both because it is something that has come in over my transom, under my transom, around my transom, over my transom. Gotta know your prepositions, folks. It's been on my mind, is what I'm trying to say, and because now is the time for one of those breaks. And what are you hearing? Yes, it's another section of our theme song, so please stay with me until we reach the other side and return to Pennant Park, and we'll see where that takes us, okay? Of late, the Rays have been using an outfield of Misner, Mangum, and Morel, and it just sounds more like a law firm, doesn't it? We had left off with the argument that John McGraw was so loyal to his friends and vice versa that it would be safe to buy landfill in Florida from John McGraw. I think this whole episode is inspired by the fact that Glengarry Glen Ross is back on Broadway. Sometimes I watch that movie and I get to the end when Al Pacino is going off on the actor formerly known as Kevin Spacey, and I don't want to quote the whole line for fear of ruining our reputation as a family-friendly broadcast here, but at one point he says, amid all the cuss words that are the play's major form of vocabulary and communication, he says, "Whoever told you you could work with men?" And I think, are they? Are they really? They're like lumberjacks? Is that what he means? That is what he means, isn't it? Because most of them come off as more like cockroaches. Maybe Ricky Roma, the character played by Pacino, is the one exception, but I'm not even sure about him. He just might be the most self-confident and articulate of the cockroaches. I don't know. We'll have to ask Mitch and Murray. So we left off, as I said, on Friends. And as I was mulling that question over during the break, McGraw's friends, it occurred to me that Arnold Rothstein and Hal Chase were among his friends, and also Uncle Robbie, Wilbert Robinson, but he threw him over after the 1913 World Series ended a friendship of decades, also a business partnership. Why? Because of a bad send at third base? That is not loyalty. That is selfish petulance. It's possible with the Glengarry Glen Ross thing that I'm misunderstanding the author's intentions, because politically he and I seem to be pretty far apart, and he may well be celebrating the masculinity of his vendors of valueless real estate, but I don't see it. There's a line, in fact, that Al Pacino has at the beginning of the story where he says, and I think I'm squishing a bunch together, something to the effect of, you say that there's an absolute morality on earth, okay, fine, but if there's a hell on earth, I refuse to live in it. I know I'm screwing that quote up somewhat. That's a very light paraphrase. Point being, if that's the way you really feel, then that gives you license to do most anything. And say that you are, of course, a kind of orphaned train candy butcher from trucks to New York in the late 19th century, well, you might feel like you had license to do anything too, including fire your best friend into the sun because of a bad send at third base during the World Series. Back to our Pennant Park Glen Ross pitch. You know there isn't a man who has ever been admitted to John J. McGraw's friendship who wouldn't walk across the brimstone pit on a rotten rail just to serve him. You know there isn't one of his millions of admirers scattered across the world, wherever the story of baseball is known, who wouldn't trust him to the ultimate limit. He is the Roosevelt of sport. Clean, honorable, trustworthy, a winner. Note that they were referring to Theodore and not Franklin, who just then was several years removed from losing the vice presidential race in the election of 1920, the presidential election, when he had been the running mate of Ohio Governor James M. Cox after serving as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, just as Cousin Theodore had during the First World War. At that moment, his political career seemed to be over because he was still in the early stages of his attempts to recover from polio, which had hit him back in 1921. He was a very robust man, you know, and from good old Dutch breeding stock, and yet a virus killed him from the waist down. So much for eugenics. Cousin Theodore had been dead since 1919. His heart went on him, he had done a lot to it, and I suppose vice versa. He was not a happy camper at the end, and without commenting on the merit of the thing, the clean, honorable, trustworthy former president of the United States had spent some of his last time on Earth defending himself from a libel suit. Therefore, you will understand why his feeling of loyalty to Florida, to his friends, to his many associates of long years in Sarasota impel him to offer the people of his newly adopted state the first opportunity to join him in his great work of building up Pennant Park. Not only will the people of Florida be given first opportunity to select their home sites in Pennant Park, but this first call privilege will carry with it a discount of 10% below the public offering of the first unit on Saturday, December 19th, 1925. This opportunity lasts only until that date, December 19th, 1925. This means that automatically on December 19th, there will be a definite, easily calculated jump in values of 10%. Already, the people of Florida have responded nobly to the first advertised offer to this effect last Sunday. Checks have rained in. The answers are still coming in. Those who have sent in their checks to John J. McGraw know this beautiful natural park that has come into his ownership. They know that when the charmingly designed community clubhouse, which will be open to owners of home sites in Pennant Park only, is completed and the greatest yacht club on the West Coast is housed there, desire for membership in that club alone will tend to increase the price of the home sites far beyond the prices at which they are selling in this pre-development stage. That clubhouse will be built. It will be a magnet to all that section of Florida lying within a radius of 100 miles of Sarasota. The regattas to be held there annually will be among the great sporting events of Florida. Each home site buyer will be given as a bonus a certificate of membership in this magnificent yacht club with the exclusive use of the yacht basin, which will be developed at great expense by John J. McGraw. And this is what John J. McGraw himself has to say to you.
I want you to join me in Pennant Park. I want you to be one of my neighbors there.
So, first thing, you'd expect that subsequent to this, there would have been McGraw Stakes and McGraw University, but for reasons we'll get into, there wouldn't be. On perhaps a more benign side of things, I want you to be one of my neighbors there does anticipate Fred Rogers a bit, but Fred wouldn't be born for nearly another 2.5 years. We should also note that this subdivision was going to be subdivided into ballplayer-named neighborhoods like Christy Mathewson Glen, and for all I know, Heine Grow Alley. I don't know why that sounds dirty, but it does. Christy had been dead of tuberculosis for about 2 months at this point. He wasn't even cold yet, but he was going to be a street. That's how the karmic circle works, I suppose. Either you get it right the first time, or you're reincarnated as a street, or maybe a turnpike or a parkway. I don't know. Perhaps I'm too influenced by New Jersey in this regard.
$200 reserves one home site. Balance of first payment December 19th. When the public sale of home sites begins in the big cities, I have visited with my ball club for 30 years. When the intensive and extensive campaign I have mapped out is put into execution, I frankly believe the public demand will exhaust the supply and that early purchasers, those who do it now, will be the chief financial beneficiaries. I voice other sentiments as well as my own when I say I expect to attract some of the foremost men of the day to Pennant Park to make it their winter home. Therefore, I say to the good people of Florida, I want you to join me at Pennant Park. I want you to join me at these introductory prices before this sale begins. I want you to join me before the prices of home sites at Pennant Park will go skyrocketing like tickets for the World Series or the Army and Navy games. Seats at the Polo Grounds last Saturday, which cost $4.50 at the box office, sold as high as $100 a pair. Do not let this happen here. Buy your seats for the big game now. Send along your $200 for a home site reservation. If you have confidence in me, if you can visualize this situation as I have visualized it, you will send along your reservation payment right now before you lay aside this newspaper. You will trust me to select your home site for you. You will bet on John J. McGraw to treat you as he himself would expect to be treated. I will take a personal interest in each individual application, and while I promise you nothing except a fair, honest run for your money, I believe that everybody coming in with me now should profit greatly by the enhanced value that must certainly come in the wake of the great development and building program I am now working out for you.
McGraw used to miss games sometimes, and a coach would run the team, usually Huey Jennings, and in the later years, future Hall of Fame shortstop Dave Beauty Bancroft, who would also manage in the majors with the Braves. Sometimes, if it weren't a key game, McGraw would go off on a scouting trip, try to find the next Mel Ott by himself. Not by himself exactly, I mean that one of his scouts would say, "Hey, John, we've got the next Mel Ott here in North Dakota. Do you want to come see him?" And sometimes he would go, and sometimes not. Sometimes, if he were lucky, the guy was next door. "Hey, I've got this young guy named Bill Terry right out here in the hall. Do you mind if I bring him in for a moment?" Sometimes he just wanted to go to the races, and I assume that sometimes he was drunk. But it occurs to me now, as we go over this, that he was missing time to work on this stuff. And note that John McGraw won no pennants after 1924, and he won no championships after 1922, though he managed for most of the next 10 years.
Let me select a home site for you at Pennant Park. As yet, I have neither literature, nor maps, nor plats, nor anything save Pennant Park. and unbounded faith in the future. You too must have faith in me, and vision. The development plans call for wide paved boulevards and all city conveniences. Perpetual building restrictions will protect your home site and investment.
Now hold on just one second. Taking that last part first. Okay, we've got NIMBYism built right from the beginning. But the rest of it is starting to sound like a cult, isn't it? You've already got the general voice of the ad before they bring McGraw himself in, saying it will be built. We will succeed in conquering Florida. Then the little Napoleon himself rolls in and says, I don't have a pamphlet or a brochure. I don't have a map. I don't have anything except my promise. All of this could be vaporware as far as you know. As far as you know, Sarasota might not even exist. It might be like Atlantis or Erewhon. And how much was Mr. McGraw asking? I'm glad you brought that up.
The prices named below are subject to 10% discount. First payment of $625 buys a $2,500 home site. First payment of $750 buys a $3,000 home site. First payment of $812.50 buys a $3,250 home site. First payment of $937.50 buys a $3,750 home site. First payment of $1,000 buys a $4,000 home site. First payment of $1,062.50 buys a $4,250 home site. First payment of $1,125 buys a $4,500 home site. First payment of $1,187.50 buys a $4,750 home site. First payment of $1,250 buys a $5,000 home site. Balance in proportion up to $10,000. Here, close to Sarasota, Florida, I am building one of the most choice residential sections in all the world. My tours around the world have taken me into many lovely harbors, and in my opinion, Sarasota Bay, on which Pennant Park is located, has no rival for beauty except the Bay of Naples in Italy.
In my part of the world, at that exact moment in time, you could buy, just to name one example, a 6-room house, not very far from where I'm sitting right now, consisting of, if I read this correctly, 1 bath, that's not a lot, but still, gas, heat, 1 block to school on a large lot for $5,500, total $500 cash down. Then again, New Jersey doesn't look much like the Bay of Naples. Now that I think of it, neither do I. I don't want to overstay my welcome with this Pennant Park bit, so let's just wrap up McGraw's last message to the credulous consumer of December 3rd, 1925, and see how things ended up for one of baseball's great foundational geniuses / wannabe Florida real estate mogul.
I have associated with me in the development and sales of Pennant Park Mr. A.S. Skinner, who is recognized as one of the great and successful operators of the state. Indeed, I consider it a compliment to Pennant Park that Mr. Skinner, after looking over the property and the development plans, associates himself with me, and stated that he considered it the most magnificent property in Southwest Florida. $200 reserves 1 home site. Other reservations in proportionate amount. Remainder of first payment on or before Saturday, December 19th. All checks, drafts, money transfers, telegraphic orders, etc. payable to the order of John J. McGraw, Sarasota, Florida. John J. McGraw, Sarasota, Florida.
All that remains is a coupon, which you can clip and send with the aforementioned payment. Well, I'll cut to the end of it. There is no Pennant Park. There never would be a Pennant Park. The hurricane was about 9 months, maybe 10 months away at that point. It showed up around September 12th or so. It was a Category 4, and it hit Miami dead on. And suddenly, all those investors in Florida real estate, landfill or otherwise, said, hold on, this place is dangerous? Even before that, though, the boom was starting to dry up. People were starting to understand that prices could not go up indefinitely and that the game of musical chairs had to end at some point. And you know how this works. You don't want to be the last guy in, the one who buys at the top of the market, and then suddenly there is no market, and you, having paid exorbitant prices for Pennant Park, now have nothing. And indeed, that is what happened. The purchases never were, I don't think, what the investors expected them to be. McGraw and or his partners defaulted on the mortgage, and at that point, any deposits that they did receive went up in smoke. Thing was that even though, and he wasn't the first player or manager to find this out, McGraw was really just lending his name to the effort, to the extent that the whole thing was a ripoff. He could have been found liable. And so, in the ensuing seasons, he worked assiduously. No, wait, I combined two words, assiduous and sedulous. They mean about the same thing, don't you know? Well, you take your pick. He worked sedulously to pay off the disgruntled investors. I'm sure some of them took haircuts, maybe all of them, but he got something back to them. As you know, McGraw handled Frankie Frisch so poorly in the mid-1920s that Frisch just walked out, and eventually a deal was made between McGraw and Branch Rickey to relieve the Cardinals of Rogers Hornsby, who they were sick of, in exchange for Frisch, who was sick of McGraw. Hornsby was a giant in 1927, and he had a terrific season for them, and he also managed the team for a good chunk of the year, maybe about a quarter of it, at least officially. This caused a lot of friction in the Giants clubhouse because, as annoying as some of the players found McGraw, well, he was Mr. Personality compared to Rogers Hornsby. But why did John J. McGraw need a substitute manager in 1927? It seems obvious, doesn't it? He was busy trying to dig his way out of Pennant Park, and maybe federal court, definitely civil court. His biographer, Charles Alexander, says that all that shoveling cost him about $100,000. Again, in 1920s money, not 2025 money. Here's my last thought on this, and it adds a note of intrigue to the proceedings that I feel like makes the journey worth it. First, it goes to show that brilliance is not always transferable, and we should all doubt ourselves a little bit once we're outside of our field. John McGraw was capable of judging a pitcher's abilities or a hitter's chances of making good in the major leagues, but what did he know from real estate? Not a whole hell of a lot. But what's really going to nag at me now, and this is not an answerable question, this possibility that I'm about to propose. I gave a hint of it earlier. I didn't even realize until I said it what I was suggesting. John McGraw knew heads of state. He knew kings and presidents. If he had wanted to ask Herbert Hoover to invest in Pennant Park, he could have arranged that. I'm not saying that Herbert would have gone for it, but it wasn't an impossibility for someone with as much celebrity as John McGraw to at least arrange to have that conversation. But you know who the richest man that John McGraw knew was? Arnold Rothstein, foundational banker for modern organized crime. When I have read in the past about John McGraw, I always took his actions to make his investors whole, or just the public subscribers to Pennant Park whole, as a mark of his character. Clearly, I overstated that. Maybe he took it as a matter of honor to bail out those poor suckers who invested, as the ad said, just based on his personal recommendation. Maybe there's something to that, but he also would have been in a lot of trouble if he hadn't. One way or another, it wasn't totally selfless. But here's the thing. If one of the people on the hook for Pennant Park was Arnold Rothstein, then McGraw's efforts to make investors whole wasn't about an obligation to the public. It was about not ending up on the bottom of the East River with cement overshoes, the last vision to meet his eyes, not the swing of Mel Ott, but the grim visage of Dutch Schultz. I'm not saying it happened or it didn't happen, just that it ain't out of the question. Rothstein was murdered on November 6th, 1928. McGraw was still around then. He'd be around until 1934. He must have breathed a sigh of relief that day. Does it sound far-fetched? Does it sound plausible to you? I'm not saying it happened or it didn't, but let's put it another way. Does it sound any more implausible than Pennant Park itself? Speaking of Florida and baseball, there used to be a theme park of sorts called Boardwalk and Baseball. That's where the Kansas City Royals played spring training games for a while. I went on one occasion. The boardwalk part was fine, but as I said earlier in the episode, I'm from New Jersey. Who needed to go to Florida for boardwalks? The baseball part was lacking. What we're not lacking is social media, and should you wish to follow me on that, you can do so at stephengoldman.bsky.social. You can also write us, by which I mean me, at infiniteinning@gmail.com, and oh god, there's a Facebook group. Simply go to Facebook, search on Infinite Inning, bang, you're there. I think it's finally time to build that website. Should you wish to support the show and that website, and I very much hope you do, please visit patreon.com/theinfiniteinning, gear of a rudimentary kind, available at teespring.com/store/the-infinite-inning, original soundtrack available gratis at casualobservermusic.bandcamp.com. Finally, should you find yourself with the proverbial moment to spare, please go to the podcatcher of your choice and rate, review, and subscribe. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, go to the podcatcher of your choice and rate, review, and subscribe. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, oh my god, it's a recursive loop. Our theme song, which you are hearing now and have been listening to throughout the episode, was a co-composition of myself and Dr. Richard Mooring, who says, wait a minute, how much did New Jersey houses cost in 1925? How do we get there? Can we go there now? Well, if I can just get hold of a DeLorean and a flux capacitor, it's always my greatest pleasure in life to delight my friends and family, so I'll be off. But since we can return to the same moment that we left, I'll be back next week with more tales from inside the Infinite Inning.